The shot that rang out through the valley that autumn day in 1878 changed everything for Katherine Wells. She had been hanging laundry behind her small homestead outside Dallas, Texas, when she heard a sound that would forever divide her life into before and after. Katherine dropped the wet sheet she'd been about to pin to the line and turned toward the house, her heart hammering in her chest. 4-year-old Samuel was playing on the porch with his wooden horses. Their eyes met across the dusty yard, and Katherine saw her own fear reflected in her son's innocent face. "Inside, Sam," she called, trying to keep her voice steady as she hurried toward the porch. "Go on in now." The boy scrambled to his feet, clutching his favorite toy horse as Katherine ushered him through the door. She scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of trouble. The land around their homestead was open, vulnerable, just like they had been since Thomas died. Katherine had made a life for herself and Samuel in the 2 years since losing her husband to typhoid. She'd maintained their small ranch with stubborn determination, though most folks in town thought she should have sold the place and moved back east to her family. But this was Sam's birthright, the only thing she had left to give him of his father. "Mama, what was that noise?" Sam asked, his dark eyes wide with concern. Katherine smiled, smoothing his tousled brown hair. "Just a hunter, I expect, nothing to worry about." But as she said it, she heard hoofbeats approaching from the east, one rider coming fast. Katherine moved to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to peek outside. A man on horseback was thundering toward the house, dust billowing behind him. "Stay here," she told Sam firmly, reaching for the rifle Thomas had taught her to use. She checked that it was loaded, then positioned herself by the door. The rider slowed as he approached, and Katherine could see he was slumped forward in the saddle. His horse, a magnificent chestnut, seemed to know its destination and came to a stop near the porch without guidance. The man raised his head and Katherine gasped. Blood streaked down his face from a wound at his hairline. His once white shirt was stained crimson across one shoulder. Despite his injuries, there was something striking about him: strong features beneath several days' growth of beard, and eyes that, even clouded with pain, were a startling blue against his sun-darkened skin. "Madam," he managed to say, his voice rough with thirst and exhaustion. "I'm sorry to trouble you, but I believe I've been shot." With those words, he slid sideways from the saddle, hitting the ground with a heavy thud. Katherine hesitated only a moment before setting down her rifle and rushing outside. Whatever trouble this man was in, she couldn't leave him bleeding in her yard. As she knelt beside him, she noticed the silver star pinned to his vest. "A lawman." "Sam," she called toward the house, "bring me the medicine box from the kitchen shelf quickly now." The wounded man's eyes fluttered open as she examined the bullet wound in his shoulder. "Names, Henry Thornton," he mumbled. "Deputy Marshal, Katherine Wells," she replied, tearing a strip from her apron to press against the bleeding wound. "What happened to you, Marshal Thornton?" "Ambush," he said, grimacing as she applied pressure. "Tracking the Calhoun brothers. They got the drop on me outside of town." The Calhoun brothers. Katherine felt a chill run through her. Everyone in the county knew of the notorious outlaws who had been terrorizing the territory for months. "Are they following you?" she asked, glancing nervously toward the horizon. "Don't think so." Henry tried to sit up, then fell back with a grunt of pain. "Lost them in the hills, but they'll be looking." Sam appeared at her side, clutching the wooden box that contained her meager medical supplies. His eyes were wide as he stared at the bleeding stranger. "Thank you, Sam," Katherine said, taking the box from him. "Now go back inside, please." "But Mama, inside, Samuel." Now, once her son had reluctantly returned to the house, Katherine turned her attention back to the wounded lawman. "We need to get you inside. Can you stand if I help you?" It took considerable effort, but with Katherine supporting much of his weight, Henry managed to get to his feet and stagger into the house. She guided him to her bed, the only proper bed in the small homestead, and helped him lie down. "I'll fetch water and bandages," she said, already moving toward the door. "Sam, stay with Marshal Thornton." As Katherine gathered what she needed, her mind raced with the implications of harboring a wounded lawman. If the Calhoun brothers were indeed looking for him, they might track him to her homestead. She and Sam would be in danger, but what choice did she have? She couldn't turn away a wounded man, especially not one who had been injured in the line of duty. Thomas would have done the same, she knew. When Catherine returned to the bedroom, she found Sam standing beside the bed, solemnly showing the marshal his wooden horse. Henry, despite his pain, was listening attentively as the boy explained his toy's name and special abilities. "He's called Thunder," Sam was saying, "because he runs faster than lightning." "That's quite a horse," Henry replied, his voice strained but kind. "I've got a real one almost that color. His name's Buck." "The chestnut?" Catherine asked as she set down her supplies. "I put him in the barn with fresh hay and water." "Thank you, madam." Henry's eyes met hers, filled with gratitude. "I'm sorry to bring trouble to your door." Catherine began cleaning the wound, which thankfully looked less serious than she'd initially feared. The bullet had grazed his shoulder rather than lodging in it. "It's not your fault you were ambushed," she said as she worked. "Sam, fetch the marshal some water, please." While her son was out of earshot, Catherine lowered her voice. "The Calhounds, how dangerous are they?" Henry's expression darkened. "Dangerous enough. 3 brothers, all mean as snakes. They've robbed 2 banks and killed at least 3 men that we know of." Catherine's hands trembled slightly as she applied a clean bandage to his shoulder. "And they're still out there?" "Yes, madam." Henry tried to sit up, then fell back with a wince. "Which is why I can't stay here. Once I've rested a bit, I need to get back to town and gather a posse." "You're not going anywhere tonight," Catherine said firmly. "That wound needs time to heal and you've lost blood. Besides, it'll be dark soon." As if to emphasize her point, the light through the window had taken on the golden hue of late afternoon. Henry seemed about to argue when Sam returned with a cup of water. "Here you go, Marshal," the boy said, carefully handing it over. "Do you catch bad guys all the time?" Henry smiled, taking the cup with his good hand. "That's my job, son, though sometimes, like today, they get the better of me." "My papa was brave too," Sam said proudly. "Mama says he wasn't afraid of anything." Catherine felt a pang in her heart. "Your father was very brave," she agreed. "Now, Sam, let's let the marshal rest. You can help me start supper." As they prepared a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and the last of the smoked venison, Catherine kept glancing toward the bedroom door. Having a man in the house again, even a wounded stranger, stirred complicated feelings. She'd grown accustomed to making all the decisions, to the quiet evenings with just her and Sam. Yet there was something comforting about Henry Thornton's presence, despite the danger he might have brought with him. After supper, Catherine checked on Henry and found him sleeping fitfully, his brow furrowed with pain. She gently placed a cool cloth on his forehead, and his expression relaxed slightly. In repose, the hard lines of his face softened, revealing a handsome man probably no more than 30 years old, not much older than her 26 years. Catherine quickly pushed that observation aside. The last thing she needed was to develop any foolish notions about a lawman who would be gone as soon as he was able to ride. She made a pallet for Sam near the fireplace and took the rocking chair for herself, her husband's rifle across her lap. Sleep came in fitful bursts as she listened for any sound that might signal trouble approaching in the night. Morning arrived with no sign of the Calhoun brothers. Catherine rose at first light to check on Henry and found him awake, looking better than he had the day before. "How are you feeling?" she asked, placing a hand on his forehead to check for fever. "Like I got shot," he replied with a wry smile, "but better than yesterday." "Good, I'll change that bandage after breakfast." She turned to go, but he caught her wrist. "Mrs. Wells," he said, his blue eyes earnest, "I want to thank you properly. Many folks would have thought twice about helping a man who might bring outlaws to their door." Catherine felt a warmth in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the morning sun streaming through the window. "I'm just doing what anyone would do, Marshal," Henry, he corrected. "And not everyone would be so kind." She gently pulled her hand away. "Well, I suppose I believe that helping others is what makes us human, Henry. Now let me get breakfast started before Sam wakes up hungry as a bear." Over the next 3 days, Henry regained his strength. The wound began to heal cleanly with no sign of infection, thanks to Catherine's careful tending. By the second day, he was able to join them at the table for meals, though the simple act clearly exhausted him. Sam had taken an immediate liking to their visitor, peppering him with questions about being a lawman and showing him every toy and treasure he possessed. For his part, Henry was unfailingly patient with the boy, answering his questions and telling him carefully edited stories about his adventures upholding the law. Katherine found herself studying Henry when he wasn't looking, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the gentle way he spoke to Sam, the strength in his hands as he attempted to help with small chores despite her protests. On the afternoon of the third day, Katherine was hanging laundry while Henry sat on the porch, whittling a small horse for Sam from a piece of pine. The boy was helping by chattering nonstop about his own imaginary adventures. And then my horse jumped over the whole canyon, Sam exclaimed, waving his arms to demonstrate the impressive feat. That must have been something to see, Henry replied, his knife carefully shaping the wooden figure. Katherine smiled as she pinned up one of Sam's small shirts. The domesticity of the scene struck her suddenly, how natural it felt to have Henry there, how easily he had slipped into their lives. The thought unsettled her. As she reached for another piece of laundry, Katherine caught movement on the horizon. 3 riders approaching fast from the direction of town. "Henry," she called, trying to keep her voice calm for Sam's sake. "We have company." Henry was on his feet in an instant, following her gaze. His expression hardened as he squinted against the sun. "Get inside," he said, reaching for the gun belt he'd hung by the door. "It's them." Katherine hurried to the porch, scooping up Sam despite his protests. "What about you? You're still not fully healed." "I've dealt with worse odds," Henry replied, checking his revolver. "Get inside and bolt the door. If things go badly, take Sam out the back and head for the creek bed. You can follow it to the Tucker place." "I'm not leaving you to face 3 outlaws alone," Katherine insisted, setting Sam down on the porch. "Sam, go to your room and stay there until Mama or Marshal Henry comes for you." Once the boy was safely inside, Katherine retrieved her rifle from beside the door. "I'm a good shot," she told Henry, whose expression had darkened further. "Thomas made sure of that." "Katherine, this is my home," she said firmly. "I won't hide inside while you risk your life to protect it." Henry looked like he wanted to argue but nodded instead. "Stay on the porch then, use the corner post for cover, and if I tell you to run, you run, promise me." Katherine nodded, her heart pounding as the riders drew closer. They could now see that it was indeed the Calhoun brothers, 3 rough-looking men with hard eyes and unshaven faces. The leader, Illy Calhoun, was easy to recognize with his distinctive red beard and the scar that ran from his left eye to his jawline. "Well, well," Illy called as they reined in their horses about 20 yards from the house. "Looks like we found our wayward marshal." Henry stepped off the porch, positioning himself between the outlaws and Katherine. Despite his injured shoulder, he stood tall, his gun held steadily at his side. "You boys are in a whole lot of trouble," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the yard. "Best thing you can do now is surrender and come in peacefully." The brothers laughed as if Henry had told a particularly funny joke. "That's rich, Marshal," Illy sneered. "3 of us, one of you and you looking like something the cat dragged in. I think you're the one who ought to be surrendering." "He's not alone," Katherine said, stepping forward with her rifle trained on Illy. "Well now, what's this?" Illy's gaze shifted to Katherine, and she didn't like what she saw in his eyes. "Hiding behind a woman's skirts, Marshal, that's not very sporting, Mrs. Wells is not involved in this," Henry said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "This is between us." The youngest Calhoun brother, barely out of his teens, spat on the ground. "She got involved when she took you in. Maybe we should teach her what happens to folks who help the law." Katherine saw Henry's shoulders tense, but his voice remained steady. "You take 1 step toward this house and it'll be your last. I promise you that." A tense silence fell over the yard. Katherine could feel sweat trickling down her back despite the cool autumn air. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger of her rifle, ready to defend her home and son if it came to that. Illy Calhoun's hand hovered near his holster. "I've been wanting to put a bullet in you for a long time, Thornton. Seems like today's the day." "I wouldn't," Henry replied calmly. "Mrs. Wells here is the best shot in the county. Even if you get me, she'll get you before you can turn your horse around." Katherine wasn't sure if that was true, but she appreciated the vote of confidence. She steadied her grip on the rifle, keeping it aimed squarely at Illy's chest. The outlaw's eyes narrowed as he assessed the situation. Whatever he saw in Katherine's determination must have given him pause. "Another time then," he said finally, though the threat in his voice was clear. "We'll be seeing you, Marshal, count on it." He turned to Katherine with a mock tip of his hat. Madam, mighty pretty place you got here, be a shame if anything happened to it. Henry took a step forward, his hand tightening on his gun. That sounds like a threat, Calhoun. Just making conversation, Illy replied with a cold smile. Boys, I reckon we've got other business to attend to today. The three outlaws wheeled their horses around and rode off, but not before the youngest brother fired a shot into the air that made Katherine flinch. She didn't lower her rifle until they were well out of sight. When she finally did, her hands were shaking. You did well, Henry said quietly, coming to stand beside her on the porch. Not many would have stood their ground against the Calhouns. They'll be back, won't they? Katherine asked, looking up at him. Henry's expression was grim. Probably. Which is why I need to get to town and gather a proper posse. We need to catch them before they hurt anyone else. Mama, Sam's voice came from the doorway, small and frightened. Are the bad men gone? Katherine quickly set down the rifle and went to her son, kneeling to wrap him in her arms. Yes, sweetheart, the bad men are gone. Everything's all right now. Sam looked past her to Henry. Did you scare them away, Marshal? Henry smiled, though Katherine could see the concern behind his eyes. Your mama helped. She's very brave, your mama. That night after Sam was asleep, Katherine and Henry sat at the kitchen table speaking in low voices. I need to leave in the morning, Henry said, turning a cup of coffee between his hands. Those men are dangerous, and the longer they're free, the more people will get hurt. Katherine nodded, trying to ignore the pang of disappointment she felt. She'd known all along that Henry would leave once he was well enough. Is your shoulder healed enough for you to ride? She asked. It'll have to be, he replied with a slight smile. Though I have to admit, your nursing skills are remarkable. I'm healing faster than I would have thought possible. My mother was a midwife back in Missouri, Katherine explained. She taught me a thing or two about tending to people. You've done more than tend to me, Henry said, his voice softer now. You and Sam, you've reminded me of what I'm fighting to protect out here. Katherine felt warmth creep into her cheeks. We just did what anyone would do. No. Henry reached across the table to cover her hand with his. Most people would have turned me away the moment I mentioned the Calhouns. You stood beside me with a rifle today, ready to defend your home against three of the most dangerous men in Texas. That's not something anyone would do. Katherine looked down at their hands, not trusting herself to speak. It had been so long since she'd felt the warmth of a man's touch, the simple comfort of human connection beyond the love she shared with her son. I have to go after them, Henry continued, gently squeezing her hand. But I want you to know that I'll come back when it's done, if you'll allow it. Katherine raised her eyes to meet his. Why would you do that? Because in 3 days I've come to care for you and Sam more than I thought possible, he answered honestly. Because you make me think about things I haven't considered in a long time, like having a home, a family, things that matter more than a badge or a gun. You barely know us, Katherine said, though her heart had begun to beat faster. I know enough, Henry replied. I know you're strong and brave and kind. I know Sam is a fine boy who deserves a chance to grow up safe and happy, and I know that I'd like the opportunity to see if what I'm feeling might grow into something more, given time. Katherine withdrew her hand gently. I lost Thomas 2 years ago. I never thought I'd consider opening my heart to anyone else. I understand, Henry said, leaning back in his chair. I'm not asking for promises, Katherine, just permission to return when my duty is done. She considered his words carefully. There was no denying the attraction she felt toward Henry Thornton, nor the way Sam had taken to him so quickly. But there were complications: his dangerous profession, the fact that they hardly knew each other, her own fears about loving and potentially losing again. Yes, she said finally. You can come back, but first you have to promise me you'll be careful. Sam has already lost one man he admired. I won't have him lose another. Henry's smile was like the sunrise. I promise, and Katherine, thank you for everything. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Henry saddled Buck while Katherine packed him provisions for the journey to town. Sam stood on the porch, clutching the wooden horse Henry had carved for him, his expression solemn. You'll come back, right? The boy asked as Henry knelt before him to say goodbye. I will, Henry promised, ruffling Sam's hair. You take care of your mama while I'm gone, all right? Sam nodded seriously. I will, and I'll keep practicing my reading so I can read you a whole story when you come back. I'm looking forward to it, Henry said, standing to face Katherine. She handed him the sack of provisions, careful to keep her expression composed despite the worry churning inside her. There's enough food for 2 days. The shoulder dressing should be changed tonight if you can manage it. I'll manage, Henry assured her. Catherine, about the cowhounds, don't, she interrupted. Just catch them and come back safely, that's all that matters. Henry nodded, then surprised her by reaching out to touch her cheek gently. I will return, he said quietly. You have my word. With that, he mounted Buck and rode away, turning once to raise his hand in farewell before disappearing over the ridge. Catherine watched until he was out of sight, then turned to Sam with forced cheerfulness. Well, we've got chores to do. Those chickens won't feed themselves. Days passed with no word from Henry. Catherine tried to keep to their normal routine, but she found herself constantly watching the horizon, hoping to see a lone rider approaching. At night, after Sam was asleep, she sat on the porch with her husband's rifle across her lap, listening to every sound and starting at shadows. A week after Henry's departure, Catherine drove the wagon into town for supplies. Dallas had grown considerably in recent years, with more businesses lining the main street and more people bustling about. She left Sam with Mrs. Peterson at the general store and made her way to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Burke, a stout man with a gray mustache and kind eyes, looked up when she entered. Mrs. Wells, he greeted her, setting aside the wanted poster he'd been examining. What brings you to town? I was wondering if you had any news of Deputy Marshal Thornton, Catherine said, trying to sound casual. He stayed at my place for a few days while recovering from an injury, understanding dawned in the sheriff's eyes. Ah, so that's where he holed up. He didn't say much when he came in last week, just gathered a posse and headed out after the cowhounds. He scratched his chin thoughtfully. They caught up to them near the Red River. Nasty business, 2 of the brothers were killed in the shootout. Catherine's heart seemed to stop. And Henry Marshal Thornton took another bullet, I'm afraid, Sheriff Burke said gravely. Not as bad as the first one, from what I hear. They brought him to Doc Wilson's place 3 days ago. Far as I know, he's still there. Catherine thanked the sheriff and hurried to the doctor's small house at the edge of town. Dr. Wilson's wife, Abigail, answered the door. Katherine Wells, the older woman said with surprise. What brings you here? I heard Deputy Marshal Thornton was injured, Catherine explained. He's alive, Abigail assured her, ushering her inside. Stubborn as a mule, that one, keeps trying to get out of bed despite Robert's orders to rest. Relief washed over Catherine. May I see him? Abigail gave her a knowing look. Of course, dear, he's in the back room. He'll be glad for the company. He's been driving Robert to distraction with his restlessness. Catherine followed her through the tidy house to a small bedroom where Henry lay propped up against several pillows, a book open on his lap. His face was pale beneath his tan, and a fresh bandage was visible under his unbuttoned shirt. He looked up as she entered, and the smile that spread across his face warmed her to her core. Catherine, he said, closing his book. I was going to come see you tomorrow. The doctor finally agreed to let me leave. Abigail snorted. Only because you threatened to walk out regardless of what he said. I'll leave you 2 to talk. She closed the door softly behind her. Catherine moved to the chair beside the bed. I heard about what happened with the cowhounds. Henry's expression sobered. It wasn't how I wanted it to end. The youngest brother, Jamie, is in custody, but Ali and Frank, they wouldn't surrender. You did your duty, Catherine said gently. No one could ask more. I kept thinking about you and Sam, Henry admitted. About getting back to you, maybe that's why I wasn't as careful as I should have been. He gestured to his wounded side. The sheriff said you were shot again. Grazed, really, nothing compared to the first one. Henry reached for her hand. I'm sorry I didn't send word. Things happened fast once we picked up their trail. Catherine squeezed his fingers. You're alive, that's what matters. Henry studied her face. And my promise to come back to you and Sam when it was over, does that still stand? Instead of answering directly, Catherine asked, what happens now? With your job, I mean. I've been thinking about that, Henry said. I've been a lawman for 8 years. It's all I've known since I was 22, but lately. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Lately, I've been wondering if there might be more to life than chasing outlaws and sleeping under the stars. Such as, Catherine prompted, her heart beating faster, such as putting down roots, finding a place to call home. His blue eyes held hers, finding someone to share it with. Catherine took a deep breath. That sounds like a significant change. It would be, Henry agreed, but the right changes can be good. Sheriff Burke mentioned he could use a deputy here in town. It would mean staying in one place regular hours, a lot less getting shot at. And is that what you want? Henry's expression was earnest. What I want is a chance to see what might grow between us, Catherine. I want to get to know Sam better, to see him grow up strong and good like his mother. I want to build something that matters. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. Thomas was the only man I ever loved, she said softly. When he died, I thought that part of my life was over. I focused everything on Sam and the ranch. I would never try to replace Thomas in your heart, Henry said, but maybe there's room there for something new, different, but just as real. Catherine thought of the past week, how she'd found herself looking for Henry at every turn, expecting to see him sitting on the porch whittling, or telling Sam stories at bedtime, or simply being present in the spaces that had felt so empty since he'd left. Yes, she said finally. I think there might be. Henry's smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. Then as soon as the doctor clears me to leave, I'd like to come call on you properly, Mrs. Wells, if that would be acceptable. Catherine couldn't help but smile in return. I believe it would be most acceptable, Mr. Thornton. True to his word, Henry appeared at Catherine's homestead 3 days later, riding Buck, who seemed as pleased to be back as his master. He'd taken the time to get a proper haircut and shave, and was wearing a clean shirt and his best vest beneath his trail-worn coat. Sam spotted him first from where he was playing in the yard. Marshal Henry, he shouted, running toward the approaching rider, you came back. Henry dismounted carefully, mindful of his healing wound, and caught Sam as the boy barreled into him. I said I would, didn't I? And I always keep my promises. Catherine emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. She'd spent the morning baking bread and apple pie, telling herself it was just an ordinary day, even as she'd put on her best dress and pinned her hair up more carefully than usual. Welcome back, she said, smiling despite her nervousness. It's good to be back, Henry replied, his eyes taking in the sight of her as if committing it to memory. They fell into an easy rhythm over the next few weeks. Henry took the position with Sheriff Burke and rented a small room above the barber shop in town. 3 days a week, he rode out to Catherine's homestead after his shift, staying for supper and helping with chores around the ranch before riding back to town. On Sundays after church, they would take Sam fishing at the creek or have a picnic under the big cottonwood tree. Henry taught Sam to ride on an elderly pony he purchased from a neighboring ranch, and Catherine watched with a full heart as the boy's confidence and skills grew under Henry's patient guidance. As autumn deepened toward winter, so did their feelings for each other. Catherine found herself looking forward to the sound of Henry's horse approaching, to the way his eyes lit up when he saw her, to the comfortable conversations they shared after Sam went to bed. For his part, Henry discovered domestic pleasures he'd never known in his years on the trail, the satisfaction of fixing a broken fence or porch step, the comfort of a home-cooked meal at a table with people he cared about, the simple joy of watching Sam master a new skill or hearing Catherine laugh at one of his stories. One crisp December afternoon, Henry arrived at the homestead to find Catherine teaching Sam his letters at the kitchen table. The boy looked up with a grin when Henry entered. Marshal Henry, I can write my name now. Want to see? I'd be honored, Henry said, hanging his hat on the peg by the door and coming to join them at the table. He watched as Sam carefully formed the letters S.A.M. on his slate. That's fine work, Henry praised, ruffling the boy's hair. Soon you'll be writing whole books. Sam beamed with pride. Mama says I'm smart like my papa was. She's right about that, Henry agreed, catching Catherine's eye with a warm smile. Sam, why don't you go collect the eggs for me? Catherine suggested. Remember to check under the hedge where that stubborn red hen likes to hide them. Once the boy had scampered outside, Catherine turned to Henry. You're good with him, she said softly. He looks forward to your visits all week. Just his visits? Henry asked, reaching across the table to take her hand. Catherine felt a blush rise to her cheeks. Not just his, she admitted. Henry's expression grew serious. Catherine, there's something I need to ask you. Her heart began to beat faster. Yes, I've been saving my deputy's pay these past 2 months, he began, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. I've got enough now to make some improvements to this place, fix the roof properly, add on another room, get some better livestock." Catherine tilted her head, confused. "That's generous, Henry, but I can't accept. I'm not offering charity," he interrupted gently. "I'm offering partnership." "Marriage if you'll have me," Catherine's breath caught. "Henry, I love you, Catherine," he continued, his blue eyes earnest. "I think I started falling for you that first day when you stood up to the Calhounds without flinching. I love your strength and your kindness. I love the way you are with Sam and the home you've made here." He squeezed her hand. "I love the man I am when I'm with you, a better man than I was before." Tears welled in Catherine's eyes. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," she whispered. "After Thomas died, I was sure that part of my life was over. But you made me remember what it feels like to have someone to lean on, to share joys and worries with. You've brought light back into our lives, Henry." "Is that a yes?" he asked, hope lighting his features. Catherine nodded, a smile breaking through her tears. "Yes, Henry Thornton, I will marry you." Henry stood, pulling her up into his arms and kissing her with all the tenderness and passion he'd been holding back for months. Catherine melted into him, her arms winding around his neck as she returned the kiss with equal fervor. A small gasp from the doorway broke them apart. Sam stood there, basket of eggs in hand, his eyes wide with surprise. "Mama," he said uncertainly. Catherine knelt down to his level. "Sam, Marshal Henry has asked me to marry him. He wants us to be a family, you, me, and him. How would you feel about that?" Sam looked thoughtfully from his mother to Henry. "Would you be my papa then?" he asked. Henry knelt beside Catherine. "I would be honored to be your papa, Sam. I know I could never replace your real father, but I promise to love you and take care of you just like he would have wanted." Sam considered this for a moment, then setting down the basket of eggs, he threw his arms around Henry's neck. "I think I'd like that," he said simply. Catherine watched the two people she loved most in the world embrace, her heart so full it might burst. This wasn't the life she had planned, but somehow it had become exactly the life she needed. They were married on Christmas Eve in the small church in Dallas, with Sam proudly serving as ring bearer. Sheriff Burke stood as Henry's best man, and Abigail Wilson helped Catherine prepare for the ceremony. "You make a beautiful bride," Abigail said, adjusting the simple veil atop Catherine's dark hair. "Henry Thornton is a lucky man." "I'm the lucky one," Catherine replied, smoothing the skirt of her cream-colored dress, a new one she'd sewn herself for the occasion. After the ceremony, they returned to the homestead where neighbors and friends gathered for a celebration. The small house was crowded but warm with goodwill and festivity. Catherine found herself watching Henry throughout the evening, the way he made sure every guest had food and drink, how he included Sam in conversations with the adults, the proud smile he wore when he introduced her as "my wife." Later, after the guests had departed and Sam had fallen asleep in his room, Catherine and Henry stood on the porch looking up at the winter stars. "Happy?" Henry asked, his arm around her waist. "More than I thought possible," Catherine answered honestly. Henry kissed her temple. "This is just the beginning, Mrs. Thornton, just the beginning." Spring came to Texas in a rush of wildflowers and new growth. The homestead, now officially the Thornton Ranch, flourished under Henry's care. He'd used his savings and carpentry skills to add 2 rooms to the house, repair the barn, and build a proper corral for the horses. Catherine's vegetable garden expanded, and a small orchard of peach and apple trees was planted along the eastern border of their property. Sam, now 5, followed Henry everywhere, absorbing everything his new father taught him about horses, farming, and being a man of honor. His reading improved rapidly with bedtime stories from both parents, and he proudly helped with age-appropriate chores around the ranch. One May afternoon, Henry rode home from town earlier than usual. Catherine was hanging laundry while Sam helped by handing her clothespins and chattering about the frog he'd found in the creek that morning. "Papa," Sam called, spotting Henry first. He dropped the clothespins and ran toward the approaching rider. Henry dismounted and caught Sam in a hug, lifting him high before setting him down. "How's my deputy today?" he asked, a game they played often. "Good, I helped Mama all day and I found a frog and I practiced my letters." Sam reported enthusiastically. "That's a full day's work," Henry agreed seriously. He looked up as Catherine approached, and the love in his eyes still made her heart skip. "You're home early," she said, accepting his kiss. "Everything all right in town, everything's fine," Henry assured her. "But I have some news I wanted to share right away." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an official-looking letter. "This came for me today." Katherine took the letter, reading it quickly. "The Texas Rangers," she asked, looking up at him with concern. "They're offering you a position." Henry nodded, watching her reaction carefully. "Captain Reynolds was passing through, heard about how we handled the cowhounds. He thinks I'd make a good ranger." Katherine felt a flutter of fear. The Rangers were an elite force, respected throughout Texas, but they faced the most dangerous outlaws and often spent weeks away from home on assignment. "What did you tell him?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Henry smiled, taking the letter back and folding it carefully before returning it to his pocket. "I told him I was flattered, but that my place is here. I've got a wife and son who need me and a ranch to build. My ranging days are behind me." Relief washed over Katherine. "You turned down the Rangers for us," Henry confirmed, "and for myself. I found something here that means more to me than any badge or adventure." He put an arm around her shoulders, looking out over their land. "This is where I belong now." Sam tugged at Henry's hand. "Can we work on the chicken coop now, Papa? You promised." Henry laughed, ruffling the boy's hair. "So I did. Let me change my clothes and we'll get right to it." As Henry headed inside, Sam lingered with Katherine. "Mama, are you happy that Papa didn't go with the Rangers?" he asked perceptively. Katherine knelt to his level. "Yes, sweetheart, I am. The Rangers do important work, but they have to travel far from home. I like having your Papa here with us every day." Sam nodded solemnly. "Me too. He promised he wouldn't leave us like my first Papa did." Katherine's heart ached at the simple statement. "Your first Papa didn't want to leave us, Sam. He got very sick, remember, but he loved you very much." "I know," Sam said, "and now I have two Papas who love me, one in heaven and one here." Katherine hugged him tightly, amazed at the wisdom of children. "That's exactly right, sweetheart." Summer turned to autumn, and with the cooler weather came news that brought fresh joy to the Thornton household. Katherine discovered she was expecting a child in the spring, and when she shared the news with Henry, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. "A baby," he whispered, his hand gently resting on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." They told Sam that night after supper, uncertain how he would take the news of no longer being an only child. To their relief, he was thrilled at the prospect of becoming a big brother. "I can teach the baby all sorts of things," he declared. "How to ride and fish and write letters." "That will be very helpful," Katherine assured him, sharing a smile with Henry over Sam's head. As Katherine's pregnancy progressed, Henry took on more of the household duties and hired a neighbor boy to help with the heavier ranch work. He hovered over Katherine with such concern that she finally had to assure him that women had been having babies since the beginning of time, and she was perfectly capable of continuing her normal activities. Within reason, Henry had insisted, and Katherine had agreed to that compromise. On a bright April morning in 1880, after a night of labor with Henry pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door and the midwife calmly directing proceedings inside, Katherine gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him William Thomas Thornton, honoring both Henry's father and Katherine's first husband. When Henry held his son for the first time, the look of wonder on his face brought tears to Katherine's eyes. "He's perfect," Henry whispered, carefully cradling the tiny bundle. "Absolutely perfect." Sam was equally enchanted with his new brother, peering into the cradle with fascination and volunteering to help with every aspect of the baby's care. "He's so small," Sam marveled. "Was I this small when I was born?" "Just about," Katherine assured him. "But you'll be amazed how quickly he'll grow. Soon he'll be running after you, wanting to do everything his big brother does." The family settled into new routines around baby William's needs. Henry proved to be an enthusiastic and capable father to an infant, getting up for night feedings so Katherine could rest, and seemingly never tiring of walking the floor with a fussy baby. "You're a natural," Katherine told him one evening as she watched him gently rock William to sleep, humming a soft tune. Henry smiled over the baby's downy head. "Never thought I'd have this," he admitted quietly. "A wife, sons, a home. For years I thought my life would be the badge and the trail until some outlaw's bullet found me." He looked up at her, his blue eyes full of emotion. "You gave me a future, Katherine, a reason to come home." Katherine crossed to him, wrapping her arms around both her husband and son. "We gave each other a future," she corrected gently. "All of us." As William grew from infant to toddler, the Thornton ranch prospered. Henry's careful management and hard work paid off in expanded herds and bountiful harvests. Katherine's skilled hands turned their house into a true home, comfortable and welcoming to all who visited. Sam, now 7, attended school in town and was developing into a thoughtful, responsible boy who adored his younger brother and took pride in helping on the ranch. One summer evening, when William was just over a year old, Katherine stood on the porch watching Henry teaching Sam to rope a practice post. William toddled nearby, supervised by the aging ranch dog, Rusty. The setting sun bathed everything in golden light, highlighting the similarities between father and son as they worked together, the same serious concentration, the same laugh when Sam's rope finally found its target. Though not related by blood, they had grown remarkably alike in mannerisms and expressions. William spotted Katherine on the porch and made a beeline for her, his chubby legs carrying him as fast as they could. "Mama," he called, arms outstretched. Katherine scooped him up, kissing his rosy cheek. "There's my little cowboy," she said fondly. Henry and Sam joined them, both flushed with exertion and pride in their accomplishments. "Did you see me, Mama?" Sam asked excitedly. "I got it on the 3rd try, I saw," Katherine confirmed. "You're getting very good at it." Henry rested his arm around her shoulders, a casual gesture of affection that had become as natural as breathing. "He's a quick learner," he said proudly. "Takes after his mother that way." They stood together as a family, watching the sun sink below the horizon. Katherine leaned into Henry's embrace, feeling the solid warmth of him beside her, the weight of William in her arms, and Sam's small hand slipped into her free one. This was the life she had built from the ashes of loss, a life rich with love, purpose, and hope. Not the life she had once planned, but somehow, miraculously, the one she was meant to have all along. 5 years passed, bringing changes and growth to the Thornton family. The ranch expanded to include more cattle and horses, becoming one of the most prosperous in the county. Henry remained a deputy, but took on more administrative duties that kept him closer to home, as Sheriff Burke approached retirement. Sam, now 12, had grown tall for his age and showed promise as both a horseman and a student. 6-year-old William was a bundle of energy with his mother's dark hair and his father's blue eyes, following his big brother everywhere and asking endless questions about everything. The family had grown again with the addition of Elizabeth Katherine Thornton, born 2 years after William. At 4 years old, Ellie, as they called her, was the undisputed princess of the ranch, a spirited little girl who had all 3 males in the family wrapped around her finger. One spring day, in 1885, Henry took Sam into Dallas on ranch business. They planned to purchase supplies, deposit money at the bank, and perhaps stop for ice cream before heading home, a father-son excursion that both looked forward to. Katherine remained at the homestead with William and Ellie, tending to her garden and household chores. The children played in the yard under her watchful eye, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. Around noon, Katherine heard horses approaching. Thinking Henry and Sam had returned earlier than expected, she wiped her hands on her apron and stepped out onto the porch. To her surprise, it was Sheriff Burke riding up, accompanied by a well-dressed stranger. "Mrs. Thornton," the sheriff greeted her, tipping his hat. "Hope we're not disturbing you." "Not at all, Sheriff," Katherine replied, though something in his manner put her on alert. "Henry's in town with Sam today." "Yes, I know." The sheriff dismounted stiffly, his age showing in his movements. "This is Mr. James Harrington from the Circuit Court in Austin. He has some business that concerns your family." Katherine's concern deepened. "What kind of business?" The stranger stepped forward, removing his hat. "Mrs. Thornton, I'm here regarding your son, Samuel Wells." "It's Samuel Thornton now," Katherine corrected, her voice cooling. "Henry formally adopted him 2 years ago." Mr. Harrington nodded apologetically. "Of course. However, the matter predates the adoption. It concerns Samuel's biological father, Thomas Wells." Katherine felt a chill despite the warm day. "What about Thomas? He's been gone for 9 years." "Yes, madam. But it seems Mr. Wells had an investment in a mining operation near El Paso before his death. That mine has recently struck a significant silver deposit, and as Thomas Wells' heir, Samuel is entitled to a substantial sum from the original investment. Katherine stared at the man in shock. Thomas had mentioned investing a small amount in a friend's mining venture, but she'd assumed that had been lost along with so much else when he died. How substantial? She managed to ask. $20,000, madam, Mr. Harrington replied, possibly more as the mine continues to produce. Katherine gasped. It was a fortune more money than she had ever imagined possessing. I have the paperwork here, Mr. Harrington continued, patting his briefcase. As Samuel is still a minor, the funds will be held in trust until he turns 18, but as his mother and guardian, you'll have some access for his education and welfare. Sheriff Burke cleared his throat. I suggested Mr. Harrington come directly to you, Katherine, before word spreads. News like this tends to travel fast. Katherine nodded, grateful for the sheriff's foresight. Thank you. Would you both come inside? I'll fix some coffee and we can discuss the details. As she prepared coffee for her unexpected guests, Katherine's mind raced with the implications of this news. The money would secure Sam's future. He could attend university if he wanted, or have capital to start his own ranch or business when he came of age. It was exactly what Thomas would have wanted for their son. By the time Henry and Sam returned home in the late afternoon, Mr. Harrington had departed with signed papers establishing the trust, and Sheriff Burke had gone back to town. Katherine had spent the intervening hours thinking about how to share the news with her family. Henry knew something was afoot the moment he saw her face. After sending Sam to wash up and check on his siblings, he took Katherine's hands in his. What is it? He asked, concern evident in his eyes. Has something happened? Katherine told him about Mr. Harrington's visit and the unexpected inheritance. Henry listened without interrupting, his expression moving from surprise to thoughtfulness. That's wonderful news for Sam, he said when she had finished. Thomas made sure he'd be provided for even after all this time. Katherine studied her husband's face, looking for any sign of discomfort with the situation. Does it bother you? She asked directly. That Sam will have this money from Thomas? Henry shook his head firmly. Not in the slightest. Sam is my son in every way that matters, but he's Thomas's son too. I'm glad he has this connection to his father. He squeezed her hands. Besides, we've taught him the value of hard work and integrity. Money won't change that. Relief washed over Katherine. I was thinking the same thing. We should tell him together. Sam took the news with surprising maturity. After the initial excitement, $20,000, really? He grew thoughtful. This was from my first father, he asked, looking between Katherine and Henry. Yes, Katherine confirmed. He invested in a friend's mine before he died. He probably never expected it to pay off like this. Sam was quiet for a moment, absently petting Rusty, who had laid his head in the boy's lap. I don't remember him very well anymore, he admitted softly, just bits and pieces. Henry put his arm around Sam's shoulders. Your mother has told you stories about him, and I know she'll tell you more whenever you ask. He was a good man who loved you very much. Sam nodded, then looked up at Henry with earnest eyes. But you're my father now. You taught me to ride and rope and do my sums. You're the one who's here. Henry's voice was thick with emotion when he replied, I'm honored to be your father, Sam. Nothing will ever change that. Sam seemed satisfied with this answer. When I'm older and can use the money, I'd like to help with the ranch, he declared. Maybe we could buy that parcel of land by the creek that Mr. Johnson is selling, and I could start my own herd there. Katherine and Henry exchanged proud glances over his head. Their son was already thinking of how his good fortune could benefit the family. That sounds like a fine plan, Henry agreed. We'll talk more about it when the time comes. That night, after the children were asleep, Henry and Katherine sat on the porch swinging the cool evening air. The events of the day had left them both reflective. I never expected Thomas to provide for Sam this way, Katherine said, her head resting on Henry's shoulder. Sometimes it feels like he's still watching over us. Henry's arm tightened around her. I believe he is, he said simply. And I think he'd be pleased with how his son is growing up. Katherine turned to look at her husband in the moonlight. You're an extraordinary man, Henry Thornton. Most men might feel threatened by a ghost from their wife's past or resentful of an inheritance coming to their adopted son. Henry brushed a strand of hair from her face. I have everything I could ever want right here, you, our children, our home. What is there to be resentful about?" He paused, then added more seriously, "Thomas Wells gave me the two greatest gifts of my life, you and Sam. I can only be grateful to him." Katherine kissed him then, pouring all her love and gratitude into the gesture. When they finally parted, she rested her forehead against his. "We are so blessed," she whispered. "More than I ever dreamed possible," Henry agreed. The following Sunday, Katherine visited Thomas's grave in the small church cemetery, something she had done less frequently in recent years. She placed fresh wildflowers beside the simple marker and stood for a moment in silent communion with the man who had been her first love. "Thank you," she said finally, "for everything. Sam is growing into a fine young man that you would be proud of, and Henry," she paused, smiling softly. "Henry loves him as his own. You would approve of him, I think. He's a good man like you were." As she turned to leave, Katherine felt a sense of peace settle over her. The past and present had found their proper places in her heart, neither diminishing the other. Life continued to unfold for the Thornton family. Sheriff Burke retired that fall, and to no one's surprise, the town council appointed Henry as his replacement. It was a position of respect and responsibility that suited him well, allowing him to serve the community while still maintaining his primary focus on his family and ranch. Sam's inheritance was safely managed by the bank in Dallas, accruing interest until he would come of age. The boy himself seemed largely unchanged by the knowledge of his future wealth, remaining the same hard-working, kind-hearted young man he had always been. One golden autumn afternoon, when William was 7 and Ellie 5, Henry returned home from town earlier than expected. Katherine was in the garden harvesting the last of the season's vegetables, with Ellie helping by collecting colorful leaves nearby, Papa's home. Ellie cried, spotting him first and running to meet him with arms outstretched. Henry dismounted and caught her in a hug, swinging her around before setting her back on her feet. "Where's your mama, princess?" he asked, though he could clearly see Katherine in the garden. "In the garden picking veggies," Ellie reported dutifully, "and William is with Sam at the creek catching frogs." She wrinkled her nose. "Boys are silly." "They certainly can be," Henry agreed solemnly, trying not to smile. "Why don't you go find them and tell them I'm home?" "I need to talk to your mama." As Ellie skipped off on her mission, Henry approached Katherine, who had straightened up from her work and was watching him with a curious smile. "You're home early," she observed, brushing dirt from her hands. "Everything all right?" "Everything's fine," Henry assured her, bending to kiss her cheek. "Better than fine, actually. I have some news." He took the basket of vegetables from her and offered his arm to escort her back to the house. Once they were settled on the porch, Henry produced a letter from his pocket. "This came from the bank today," he explained, handing it to her. "It's about Sam's trust fund." Katherine frowned slightly as she unfolded the paper. "Is there a problem?" "No problem at all," Henry said, a smile playing at his lips. "Quite the opposite." Katherine read the letter, her eyes widening. "The mine has been sold to a larger company, and Sam's share is now $35,000. She looked up at Henry in astonishment. "That's almost double the original amount," Henry nodded, taking the letter back and folding it carefully. "Mr. Patterson at the bank says it's one of the largest trust accounts he's ever managed. Sam will be quite a wealthy young man when he turns 18. Katherine was silent for a moment, processing this news. "It's wonderful for Sam, of course," she said finally. "But I hope it doesn't change him. Money can do strange things to people." "Sam has a level head on his shoulders," Henry assured her, "and he's had good examples to follow. I don't think we need to worry about him forgetting what matters." Katherine nodded, trusting in her husband's assessment and in the character they had helped Sam develop. "When should we tell him?" "I thought we might wait until after supper," Henry suggested. "Let him enjoy an ordinary afternoon of frog hunting with his brother first." Katherine smiled, appreciating Henry's wisdom. "That sounds perfect." Later that evening, after the younger children were in bed, Katherine and Henry sat with Sam at the kitchen table and shared the news about his increased inheritance. As they had hoped, Sam took it in stride. "That's a lot of money," he acknowledged thoughtfully, "but it doesn't change my plans. I still want to expand our ranch when I'm older, maybe build a house of my own on that piece by the creek." He looked up at them with earnest eyes. And I want to make sure William and Ellie have the chance to go to school in Austin or even back east if they want to, like we talked about for me." Katherine felt tears of pride sting her eyes. This thoughtful young man, already planning how to use his good fortune to benefit his siblings, was everything she and Thomas could have hoped for in a son. "You're a fine brother, Sam," Henry said, his own voice thick with emotion. "And we're very proud of the man you're becoming." Sam ducked his head, embarrassed by the praise. "It's getting late," he said, standing up from the table. "I promised to help Mr. Johnson repair his fence tomorrow, so I'd better get some sleep." After he'd gone to his room, Katherine turned to Henry with a smile. "Our son," she said simply, encompassing in those two words all the pride and love she felt for both Sam and the man who had helped raise him. Henry took her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Our son," he agreed. "Thomas would be proud." The following spring, when Sam was 13, the family traveled to Austin for a special occasion. Henry had been invited to receive an award from the governor for his service as sheriff, particularly for his work in organizing a regional approach to law enforcement that had significantly reduced cattle rustling throughout the county. It was the children's first trip to the state capitol, and they were wide-eyed with excitement at the grand buildings, busy streets, and bustling activity of the city. They stayed in a proper hotel, another first, and Katherine made sure everyone had new clothes for the ceremony. The night before the award presentation, after the younger children were asleep in the adjoining hotel room, Sam sat with Katherine and Henry discussing his future. The trip to Austin had sparked his imagination about possibilities beyond the ranch. "I've been thinking," he said, with the serious manner he often adopted when addressing important topics. "After I finish school in Dallas, I might like to study law, like you wanted to before you became a marshal, Papa." Henry looked surprised but pleased. "You'd make a fine lawyer, Sam. You have a good mind for details and a strong sense of justice." "I could come back home afterward," Sam continued. "Dallas or even Fort Worth could use another lawyer, and I'd still be close enough to help with the ranch." Katherine smiled at her son's careful planning. At 13, he was already mapping out a path that balanced his own interests with his commitment to family. "That sounds like a wonderful plan, Sam, and now you'll have the means to pursue it." Sam nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I've been reading about the law school in Austin. Students can start when they're 18 if they've had the right preparatory education." Henry and Katherine exchanged glances, both thinking the same thing: their boy was growing up, making plans for a future that would take him away from home, at least for a time. "Well," Henry said finally, "we have a few years yet before we need to worry about sending you off to law school. Plenty of time to make sure you're prepared." The next day, Henry received his award from the governor, with his family proudly watching from the front row. The governor made special mention of Henry's background as a Texas Ranger, slightly exaggerated, as Henry had only been offered a position he didn't accept, and his dedication to bringing law and order to the frontier. At the reception afterward, Sam stayed close to his father, listening intently as various officials and dignitaries congratulated Henry. Katherine managed the younger children while keeping an eye on her oldest son, noting how he observed the social interactions with keen interest. An elderly judge approached Henry, shaking his hand warmly. "Sheriff Thornton, congratulations on your well-deserved recognition. Your county is fortunate to have you." "Thank you, Judge Harmon," Henry replied respectfully. "May I introduce my son, Samuel?" The judge turned his attention to Sam, who straightened his shoulders and offered his hand. "Pleased to meet you, sir," Sam said with perfect courtesy. "Young man, your father is a credit to the badge," the judge said, shaking Sam's hand firmly. "Are you planning to follow in his footsteps?" "Not exactly, sir," Sam replied. "I'm thinking of studying law." The judge's bushy eyebrows rose with interest. "Are you indeed? A noble profession. Perhaps you'll appear in my courtroom someday." "I'd be honored, sir," Sam said, and Katherine could hear the genuine respect in his voice. Later, as the family prepared to return to their hotel, the governor himself stopped them to speak privately with Henry. Katherine couldn't hear what was said, but she saw her husband's surprised expression and the thoughtful look that followed as he rejoined them. What was that about? She asked quietly as they walked back to the hotel, the children skipping ahead under Sam's watchful eye. "The governor has asked me to consider a position on the State Commission for Law Enforcement," Henry explained. "It would mean occasional trips to Austin for meetings, but I could remain sheriff in Dallas." Katherine studied his face. "You're considering it?" "It's an honor to be asked," Henry admitted, "and it would be a chance to have a broader influence on how law enforcement evolves in Texas." He glanced at the children walking ahead of them. "What do you think?" Katherine slipped her arm through his. "I think you would bring valuable experience and wisdom to such a position, and the children would be proud to have their father recognized this way." She smiled up at him. "I'm already proud." Henry squeezed her hand gratefully. "I'll think about it. It would mean some time away from home and additional responsibilities." "We would manage," Katherine assured him. "The children are older now, and Sam is a tremendous help with the ranch." She paused, then added more softly, "You've given so much to us, Henry. If this is something you want to pursue, you should do it." The love and understanding in her eyes warmed Henry's heart. After nearly 7 years of marriage, Katherine still had the ability to surprise him with her strength and generosity of spirit. "What did I ever do to deserve you?" he wondered aloud. Katherine laughed lightly. "You got shot and fell off your horse in my front yard," she reminded him. "Best day of my life." Henry laughed too, drawing her closer as they walked. "Mine too, Mrs. Thornton. Mine too." 2 years later, in the spring of 1887, 15-year-old Sam was given permission to accompany a neighboring rancher on a cattle drive to Kansas. It would be his first significant time away from home, and though Katherine was anxious, she recognized it was an important step toward manhood for her eldest son. Henry, now serving his second year on the State Law Enforcement Commission while continuing as sheriff, had made arrangements to ensure Sam's safety on the journey. The trail boss, Jim Harker, was a man Henry had known for many years and trusted implicitly. Sam would be assigned to help the cook and learn the business of the trail from experienced hands. The morning of departure, Katherine hugged her son fiercely, trying to memorize the feel of him no longer a child but not quite a man, tall and lanky with the promise of Henry's height and Thomas's build. "Be careful," she whispered. "Listen to Mr. Harker and write to us when you can." "I will, Mama," Sam promised, returning her embrace before stepping back with an embarrassed glance at the cowboys waiting nearby. Henry shook Sam's hand solemnly, then pulled him into a brief, tight hug. "Make us proud, son," he said simply. "I will, Papa," Sam replied, his voice cracking slightly on the words. 9-year-old William was next, trying manfully not to cry as he said goodbye to his hero and big brother. "Bring me back something from Kansas," he asked hopefully. Sam ruffled his brother's hair. "I'll try to find you something special," he promised. 7-year-old Ellie made no attempt to hide her tears, clinging to Sam's legs until he knelt down to her level. "I'll be back before you know it, Princess," he assured her. "And you need to stay here and keep an eye on Mama and Papa for me, all right?" Ellie nodded solemnly, accepting this important mission. "I will, I'll be brave." With final waves and calls of goodbye, Sam mounted his horse and joined the other cowboys. The cattle drive moved out slowly, dust rising as hundreds of hooves began the long journey north. Katherine watched until she could no longer distinguish her son among the distant riders. "He'll be fine," Henry said, his arm around her shoulders. "Jim will look after him, and it's good experience." "I know," Katherine agreed, brushing away a tear. "It's just the first time he's been so far from home." "But not the last," Henry observed gently. "He's growing up, Katherine. We have to let him find his own path." Katherine nodded, taking comfort in her husband's steady presence and in the smaller hands of William and Ellie slipping into hers as they turned back toward home. The summer passed slowly without Sam. William and Ellie missed their big brother intensely at first, but gradually adjusted to his absence. Katherine kept them busy with projects and activities, while Henry divided his time between sheriff's duties, commission work, and overseeing the ranch. Letters arrived sporadically from Sam, full of exciting tales of life on the trail, crossing swollen rivers, weathering storms, encountering Indians who traded fresh meat for coffee and sugar. Katherine read these letters aloud to the family at supper, and they were carefully preserved in a special box for Sam's return. In late August, just as Katherine was beginning to worry about when they might expect Sam home, a rider approached the ranch in the early evening. Henry was in town attending to sheriff's business, and Catherine was helping Ellie feed the chickens when they spotted the lone horseman. "Mama, look," Ellie cried, pointing excitedly. "Is it Sam?" Catherine shielded her eyes against the setting sun, trying to make out the distant figure. "I don't think so, sweetheart. Let's go inside until Papa gets home." But as the rider drew closer, Catherine gasped in recognition. It was indeed Sam, but so changed that she had not known him at first glance. His skin was deeply tanned, his frame filled out with new muscle, and he sat his horse with the easy confidence of a seasoned cowhand. "Sam!" Ellie shrieked, dropping her basket of chicken feed and running toward her brother. William emerged from the barn at her cry and followed close behind. Sam dismounted just in time to catch Ellie as she launched herself into his arms. "Hey there, princess," he laughed, swinging her around before setting her down to greet William with a rough hug. Catherine hung back, momentarily overwhelmed by the transformation in her eldest son. In just 3 months, he seemed to have left boyhood behind entirely. When he finally turned to her, however, she saw in his smile the same sweet nature that had always been there. "Mama," he said simply, opening his arms to her. Catherine embraced him, noting how his shoulders had broadened and how he now stood several inches taller than she did. "Welcome home, Sam," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "We've missed you terribly." "I missed you too," he admitted, stepping back to look at her properly. "All of you." The trail was an adventure, but there's nothing like coming home. Henry arrived shortly thereafter, having passed another rider from the cattle drive who informed him of Sam's return. The family gathered around the kitchen table as Sam unpacked gifts from his saddlebags: a small carved whistle for William, a pretty hair ribbon for Ellie, and for Catherine, a lovely silver brooch from a shop in Wichita. "And for Papa," Sam said, reaching deeper into his bag, "something special from a man I met on the trail." He produced a well-worn book bound in soft leather. "It's a journal written by a Texas Ranger back in the 40s. The man who gave it to me said his father served with the Rangers and thought a lawman like you would appreciate it." Henry took the book reverently, turning it over in his hands before carefully opening the cover. "This is a treasure, Sam, thank you." Sam beamed at his father's approval, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. "And one more thing," he said, his expression turning serious as he placed the pouch on the table. "My wages from the drive." He untied the pouch and spilled its contents onto the table: a small pile of coins and several folded bills. $43.75, he announced proudly. "Mr. Harker said it was a fair wage for a first-timer who worked as hard as I did." Catherine and Henry exchanged proud glances. "That's a tidy sum, son," Henry said. "What are you planning to do with it?" Sam straightened his shoulders. "I'd like to put most of it in the bank toward my education," he said decisively. "But I'd also like to contribute something to the family, since you and Mama have provided everything for me all these years." Catherine felt tears spring to her eyes at this evidence of her son's maturity and thoughtfulness. "That's not necessary, Sam. We're just so happy to have you home safe." "I know it's not necessary," Sam replied earnestly, "but it's what I want to do." He separated $10 from the pile and pushed it toward Henry. "For the family fund, if you'll accept it." Henry looked at his son for a long moment, then nodded solemnly. "We accept with thanks. Your contribution will be noted in the ranch accounts." The formal acknowledgement seemed to satisfy Sam, who gathered up the remaining money and returned it to the pouch. "I'll ride into town with you tomorrow to deposit this at the bank, if that's all right." "Of course," Henry agreed. "Now tell us more about your adventures. We've read your letters, but I'm sure there are stories you saved to tell in person." As Sam regaled them with tales of the cattle drive, the characters he'd met, the challenges they'd faced, the lessons he'd learned, Catherine watched her family gathered around the table. Henry listened intently, asking questions that showed his interest and respect for Sam's experiences. William and Ellie hung on their big brother's every word, their eyes wide with wonder at his adventures. This, she thought, was the family she and Henry had built together, a family founded on love, respect, and the bonds that grew stronger with each passing year. They had faced challenges and celebrated joys, weathered losses and embraced new beginnings. And at the center of it all was that moment 9 years ago when a wounded lawman had fallen from his horse in her yard. setting in motion events that would change all their lives for the better. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Katherine and Henry sat on the porch swing in the cool evening air, as had become their custom. The stars shone brilliantly in the clear Texas sky, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of late summer flowers. "Sam's grown up so much," Katherine observed, her head resting on Henry's shoulder. "I hardly recognized him when he first rode up." "He has," Henry agreed, his arm tightening around her, "but he's still our Sam at heart. Did you see how he remembered exactly what William and Ellie would want for gifts? And that journal he found for me that showed real thought. And offering part of his wages for the family," Katherine added. "That nearly broke my heart, it was so sweet." "He's becoming a fine man," Henry said, pride evident in his voice. "A credit to both his fathers." Katherine smiled at that. Henry had never shown jealousy or resentment of Thomas's place in their lives, always making sure Sam knew and respected the father he had lost while also embracing the father he had gained. "I was thinking about the day we met," she said, changing the subject slightly. "How different our lives might have been if the Calhounds hadn't ambushed you that day." Henry chuckled softly. "I've actually thanked them for that in my mind more than once. Best thing those outlaws ever did was sending me in your direction with a bullet in my shoulder." Katherine laughed too, lifting her head to look at him in the moonlight. Despite the silver threading through his hair at the temples and the lines that life had etched around his eyes, Henry was still as handsome to her as he had been that first day. "Do you remember what you said when you found Sam and me at the creek about a week after you arrived?" she asked. "When he was showing you his special fishing spot," Henry smiled at the memory. "I do. He took my hand so naturally, like he'd decided I belonged with you both before I'd even figured it out myself." "Looks like he decided before I did," Katherine quoted softly, "but you'd already decided too, hadn't you?" "I think I knew from the first moment I saw you," Henry admitted, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Standing there with your rifle ready to defend your home and son against any threat, I'd never seen anyone so beautiful or so brave. Even covered in dirt and terrified," Katherine teased. "Especially then," Henry assured her. "When a man's been shot and is half delirious with pain, he sees right to the heart of things, and what I saw was the woman I wanted to spend my life with." Katherine leaned up to kiss him, a kiss full of 9 years of shared love and memories. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. "I love you, Henry Thornton, more today than yesterday and not as much as I will tomorrow." "And I love you, Katherine Thornton," he replied, his voice husky with emotion, "until the stars fall from the sky." As if on cue, a shooting star blazed across the heavens, a fleeting streak of brilliance against the eternal darkness. Katherine made a silent wish not for anything new or different, but simply for the continuation of this life they had built together, this family they had created from love and second chances. The star faded, but the wish remained, carried on the night breeze and settled into the very foundations of the home where their children slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were loved. In the years that followed, the Thornton family continued to grow and flourish. Sam attended law school in Austin as planned, returning to Dallas to establish a successful practice. He eventually married the daughter of a local rancher and built a home on that piece of land by the creek he had spoken of as a boy. William followed in Henry's footsteps, becoming a respected lawman known for his fairness and courage. Ellie, to everyone's surprise, developed a talent for medicine and became one of the first female doctors in the state after studying in Philadelphia. Henry served as sheriff until his retirement at age 60, then devoted himself fully to the ranch and his growing brood of grandchildren. Katherine, the heart of the family, continued to bind them together with her love, wisdom, and the stories she shared of their beginnings, including the tale of a wounded deputy who rode into their lives and changed everything. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when they sat together on that same porch swing, now weathered by decades of Texas sun and rain, Henry would take Katherine's hand and remind her of that long-ago day when a small boy's innocent gesture had revealed a truth that would shape all their futures. "Looks like he decided before I did." To which Katherine would always reply with a smile that had not dimmed with the passing years, "And aren't we lucky that he did?"